Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. And before we start the session, this is Lee talked about this a little bit ago in the keynote, where he's talking about how Prisma Access is a new foundation for the SASE framework. So we're going to talk about a little bit more details on that topic in this session. My name is Joby Menon. I'm a Director of Product Management at Palo Alto Networks for our Prisma Access product line. And I'm joined here by, I'll let Warby introduce himself.
Yeah, Warburton, also Product Manager. My focus is on the infrastructure side of Prisma Access.
All right, so with that, so here's the agenda for this session. So we'll talk about why SASE framework makes sense and what is it about, and why Prisma Access or our unique approach to that SASE framework. And we'll talk about a little bit of the use cases where you can apply this framework in your security posture. And then we will go a little bit more deeper into the feature sets of Prisma Access that help you deploy security in a SASE framework. And then we'll come back and talk about a little bit of the business value, and then what momentum we are seeing in the field behind this framework, right? So what are the foundational emerging challenges because of which this framework is being proposed by Gartner, right? The reason for that one is, if you start looking at how the businesses are transforming, you will see that about 94% of the businesses or the enterprises around the world are doing some form of cloud adoption. Whether it is one app or 10 apps or 100 apps, they are deploying applications in the public cloud, right? Is there anybody in the room who's not deploying an app in the public cloud? Zero? Okay, so that's 100% for this room then, not 94. And the researchers are also predicting that about like 42% of the user base will be mobile workforce in the next couple years. That number would be around like 30% or something as of today, but that number will grow up to about 42% of the mobile workforce that is computing from outside of your controlled environment, which means they will be working from public networks like Starbucks, hotels, home offices, and so on and so forth, right? And then also, if you start looking at branch and retail, and this is a very interesting fact, saying that like how the attacks of the POS systems in these networks have overtaken the regular attacks that are happening inside a network, right? So if put all of these things together, what's happening is, in order to solve these problems, what customers or enterprises have been deploying in their network, it is that it's that fragmentation of different technologies. This is the 200 security vendor landscape that Amit talked about in the keynote. This is that picture that Neer was showing in his presentations, where the bills versus the bolts, and many homes are built with ladders and so on and so forth. That picture that can collapse any moment. This is what it is about, right? In order to deploy this, you're deploying multiple kinds of different technologies for different use cases. Branch and branch use cases. You have an MPLS or a site-to-site VPN. And then you have a secure web gateway. You have proxies deployed in the environment. You also have mobile remote user VPNs deployed in the environment, CASBs deployed in the environment. And all of them has to sit together in order to provide the security across your enterprise. And in order to do that, now you have to talk about like multiple management consoles, multiple people who needs to be trained and operationally efficient in order to be able to do this. So first, this is a very complex architecture to manage and maintain. Second, it provides a very poor user experience because the user's security posture or the access to application varies based on his location. If he's in a branch location, he may get access to different set of resources. When he's mobile, he'll get access to a different set of resources, and so on and so forth, right? And on top of that, it does create security gaps, because if you find a threat or a policy in one place, in one product, does not apply the same policy in other places. And it does leave gaps in your security and posture, right? So what is our unique approach? And this is something that Gartner defined, which is called Secure Access Service Edge, and they're calling it as SASE. That's the acronym for it. And SASE, what that means is you deploy network as a service you deploy security also as a service so that you consume all of this, and together it forms as a secure access service edge. And what that secure access service edge means, networks and users and infrastructures connect into that access edge as a network as a service, and then a security is applied on top of that connectivity, and then you get the benefits of or different things. And what are those different things? For security as a service, we have talked about this, the SSL decryption, CASB, cloud secure web gateways, zero trust network access, firewall, DNS, DLP, and sandboxing. This is what Gartner is also defining as the security as a service offering that needs to be delivered from this framework. And on top of that, saying for the network piece of it, SD-WAN, QoS, and policy-based forwarding, and IPsec VPN and SSL VPN has to be delivered in order for this to form an edge where the users or networks can connect and get consumed as a security. Right? So Prisma Access provides exactly that. It provides network as a service layer where your mobile users and the branch users can connect into. And then it provides a security as a service layer on top of that. So once the connectivity is complete, you apply a security layer on top of the traffic that comes into the network, and it allows you access to the destinations where your applications resides. And that applications could reside in public cloud, SaaS, your data center, or just general internet web browsing. Right? And then you can manage all of this from a central management platform for both network and security from a common management platform. That's what Prisma Access is able to provide. And if I break this into what are in these each buckets, then you'll see that for branch and retail and mobile users, you can connect into the network using any of those technologies, which is like you can connect into the service using an SD-WAN, an IPsec tunnel, you can apply QoS on it, you can connect using an SSL VPN, you can policy-based forward your traffic into the network, and you can also provide this network as a service when these different endpoints can connect into. And once the traffic enters the service through this network layer, then a security layer gets applied, and in that layer you have the most comprehensive security, which is everything like DNS, DLP, sandboxing, threat prevention, URL filtering, SSL decryption, all enabled on that one. And for Prisma Access management, you have both options, which is a cloud management as well as a management using our existing Panorama that you can manage your on-prem firewalls also with. And then you can connect into different applications no matter where the applications are for SaaS or public cloud or your data center or it's general internet web browsing. So if you look at this, it is combining all of those disparate technologies into one platform that you can just consume as a service. You don't need to deploy any of this secure web gateway, CASB, firewall. Everything is consumed as a service without you having to deploy or manage or operate any of that. You only manage policies in order to be able to get access to this network. And on top of this Prisma Access is deployed in more than 100 plus locations around the world. So it's available for you to be able to consume just as a service where you want it, no matter where your businesses are or where your users are located. Okay. So with that, that's a little bit, Warby will talk about more of the use cases and other elements of the SASE framework.
Thank you, Joby. So I'm going to go into a couple use cases and then do a little bit of a deep dive on the actual service. So for the mobile user use case, traditionally, this was solved using a remote access VPN, which was good for getting users to your data center where your application was hosted, probably behind your firewall. But as we have more and more cloud adoption, more and more SaaS apps, as well as more and more public cloud hosted apps of your own, this doesn't work very well. So what often happens is using a traditional solution, you're backhauling the user all the way to a data center and then going out to the cloud to get security. Performance isn't as good, and so what do users do? They turn it off. So now they're happy because the performance is better, but you're completely blind to what they're doing. So it's not a good security posture, and the user is having to choose between being a good corporate citizen and following the process or getting better performance so they can get their job done, which is not a situation we want to put our users in. So On the left, backhauling to the data center where you had your security stack, giving them the security with high latency. Sometimes they turned it off. On the right, get that security close to where they are. So they have really good performance, but still give them the access to the corporate data center where you may still have applications running. So it's the best of both worlds. You have the remote access VPN solved. That's the security or the network as a service component. But you also have the security stack close to where the user is. So if your headquarters is in Europe and you have users in Asia or in the US, they can get security there, not have to backhaul to Europe. So they're not turning it off because most of the time they don't even remember it's on. It just works and they're happy. So as Joby mentioned, we have lots of locations, keeping the latency as low as possible, not impacting the performance. We're using our next generation security stack in the cloud, so all the applications are supported. It doesn't have to be a proxyable solution like Nir talked about. It is a full security stack. So all the applications are handled, and it's always there. I do a lot of discussions with customers. I'm doing a demo, and they say, well, what does the client even look like? And I was like, oh yeah, I've been running it this whole time. I forgot it was running, but let me show you that it's running and how I could manually connect if it wasn't running. But it's just always on. It's just always there. So switching gears to branch and retail, the second use case. Common way to solve this, MPLS. Just like we talked about in my morning session and Nir and Lee talked about, you can use MPLS to backhaul. It's expensive. Broadband has become very cheap and is a lot more available across the world than it used to be. Broadband gets users very quickly to the SaaS applications. The SaaS applications are hosted around the world. There's caching. There's a broad CDN network. So broadband's really good for getting to that. But if you go direct to the application, then again, you're blind to it. So you have the same struggle that we had with mobile user. Do you backhaul to give them full security, or do you let them stay local and then put a lightweight security stack that's not as good as what you have in your headquarters, or it's difficult to manage because of the scale? So again, on the left, traditional MPLS backhaul, higher latency. On the right, just like mobile user, get the security close to where the users are consuming it. So if you have branches all over a continent or all over the world, you can get security close to where they are, get them back to the internet quickly if they're going to SaaS application, give them that good broadband experience, but also get them back to the headquarters if they need to get to hosted applications on your site. So you get a better user experience. You've lowered your cost because you can replace some or maybe all of your MPLS, and you're not compromising on security. You have the same security posture everywhere. You as a customer manage it either via Panorama or the new cloud management. You have full control, and you're not having to do a subset of security features at a branch location that you have at your headquarters. You have the full stack in all locations. So a little more details. As Nir and Lee talked about, you can connect SD-WAN to Prisma Access. Prisma Access can be your hub. You don't have to deploy the hubs and form all of the backbone and do all the peering with the SaaS applications. We've done that, and so you can just leverage that service from all these SD-WAN devices, whether it's ours or a third-party integration. Very high performance, easy to consume, and you're getting the full security stack when you use our solution. When you're connecting to the service, you have all these different methods. So branch retail locations typically is IPsec VPN today. Mobile users can be IPsec or SSL. We now will have a branch retail SD-WAN option. There's something called Clean Pipe. It's a third use case that service providers are purchasing from us, where they can take their tenants, their own customers, bring them across their network, and then come out clean pipe aggregation points at very high speed, up to 10 gigabits per tenant. And they can do that across hundreds or thousands of tenants. And then the clientless VPN, so if you're working with a partner or you have a situation where employees have their own devices that can't run the client for any reason, then you can use clientless VPN to solve for that. So that's all the networking part, but we still need security. We don't want to buy a good network solution where security is an afterthought. So all the things you get in PAN-OS you get here. So user ID, app ID, HIP profiles. You can get all the information, have full visibility and control, and really be very granular with your policy, whether it's going to a SaaS app, going to the public cloud hosted app, or to your data center. DLP is very important here. And now with the new DLP feature, that is now in line with Prisma Access. And for your connections, I talked to somebody in the earlier session today. They were trying to find the right balance of, do I buy a whole bunch of throughput or do I buy a little bit less, but how do I deal with when I run out? So we do enforce at about, I think it's 110% of the throughput that you license for a site. So I'm talking about branch or retail locations. Definitely you want to turn on QoS in this case so that your business critical applications are guaranteed a certain amount of throughput. And at the other end, non-critical applications, YouTube, Netflix, if you allow those things, you can reduce the maximum amount of throughput they'll get so they're not taking too much from the pipe. And oh, by the way, you can actually use domain-based routing to keep those off the network in the case of mobile users, which is a really good feature as well. So in this release that's coming out now, we have DNS security. So that's the PAN-OS feature that was in 9.0, which we're adding to Prisma Access. So we have all these sources of intelligence on the left. DNS is one of those applications where traditionally you opened up port 53 and just kind of crossed your fingers, and attackers know that. They leverage that heavily, because if you try to lock it down and you do a bad job at it, everything breaks because everything needs DNS. And so a lot of people just leave it open without really good inspection. So we have all these sources of information to find out how DNS is being abused, whether it's data exfiltration or malware. And we use that to block all the bad domains. But we also monitor what we don't know is bad yet and very quickly add that to our intelligence and block that. We also look for DNS tunneling. That's a really common data exfiltration technique, is just to leak data slowly through what looks like DNS queries. We can monitor for that and stop that as well. All of this works in Prisma Access. And we've always had all the threat prevention features. So in addition to app ID, user ID, you should be doing SSL decryption. Hopefully you saw Mandeep's session this morning. If you haven't, I believe it was recorded. It's a really good session on how to go about SSL decryption. You should absolutely be doing that in your Prisma Access service as well. Because it's a shared ownership model, you own the policy, including what to SSL decrypt, because you know the local laws and requirements for what you can do. We don't do that for you, but we have best practices recommendations to help you get started, including that session this morning. But you get all of the threat information, wildfire, passive DNS, all those features are included as part of the service. You don't have to go add subscriptions and monitor that, and when do you do renewals? We own that, we do that for you. You just apply the policy to use those features. And now with the release coming out, DLP. So inline, built into Prisma Access, you can do DLP. This was something that a lot of customers were waiting for, so they're very happy about. It lets you create really good control about what traffic is leaving your network, making sure the wrong things aren't going out, and you can get reports. You can actively block things with all the different built-in and custom patterns. Really powerful feature. And there's a lot of patterns built in based on specific country requirements about what PII is. So CASB, one of the features that Joby showed earlier, just want to highlight a little bit. So you can have all your users, whether they're mobile users or branch locations or from a headquarters, going through next-gen security service using Prisma Access. But you can also layer on top of that, on the top right there, using the API, Prisma SASE, so that the data, while it's there, you can monitor it. You can look for things. You can see, is the the permissions too wide, or is there malware that some user uploaded and we need to quarantine that? So even while the data is at rest in your cloud, our Prisma SASE service will look for that, it will monitor it, it'll give you reporting, it'll block it, quarantine it, whatever it needs to do. So it's another layer of protection that you can add on top of this. And lastly, clean pipe, which I mentioned a couple times. So on the left, we have a service provider. Maybe it's a large telco or an MSSP. They have lots of customers, and each of those customers may have many sites. So they buy from this telco connectivity. The telco can sell them a value add-on security service, which can now be delivered from Prisma Access via this clean pipe use case. So what this does is it actually connects those tenants over Google's Partner Interconnect, which is kind of like Direct Interconnect or AWS's Direct Connect, but it's all API driven. So this can be provisioned in under an hour per tenant, all with APIs from Panorama. Each of those tenants, which again could be many sites for that region, comes into a unique VPC running their provisioned security stack of Prisma Access. This is an outbound to the internet use case for securing high-speed traffic. And as it says here, up to 10 gigabits, so it's very high throughput. So I'm going to pass it back to Joby to go through some business values, and then I'll come back up for Q&A.
Thanks, Warby. So the real goal about this framework is to be able to deliver a better business outcome, right? The better business outcome is how quickly can you onboard a site, or how quickly can you onboard your mobile workforce. Because this infrastructure is delivered as a service and delivered from the cloud, and it's available in almost 100 plus locations around the world, covering about 70 plus countries. The speed and agility with which you can onboard this infrastructure at that massive scale is in days or hours, not years or months of planning. And we have seen some of our larger customers being able to get this service up and running and deliver to their users within a couple days. Right? That's the advantage of this. Like, you just come into your management platform and you click a few buttons here and there, and some magic happens in the back end, and the firewalls and the infrastructure and the services is all ready for you to start consuming it. That's the power of delivering this framework as a service offering to our customers. It really takes off the operational burden of deploying and managing this infrastructure at that global footprint. Right? And because now you're deploying this across your entire infrastructure, what happens is you get a really good consistent security. No matter where the user is, whether they are mobile workforce, they are working from Starbucks, they are working from your headquarters, or they are working from a branch office, they are all going through exactly the same security policy. And that is the best of breed security that can be available in all ports and all protocols, fully connected. Anybody can talk to anybody, which means mobile users is connected to your headquarters data centers, mobile users is connected to your public cloud applications, mobile users is connected to your SaaS applications, mobile user can also browse to the internet. So nothing is left behind, and all the branches can talk to each other. The headquarters and help desk staff sitting in the headquarters can reach the mobile users, can reach the branch users, do all of that work in a very, very efficient, secure manner. That's the power of the platform. So you are getting a very consistent security posture because your policies are all managed from one single place and deployed across the entire infrastructure. You're not writing policies which are different for mobile users versus branch user depending on where the user is. Make sense? And because of this, you have reduced your operational and complexity. How many of you are familiar with Panorama here? Okay, almost everybody. So this entire Prisma Access service just becomes one template stack and one device group in that Panorama infrastructure. And the policies, the configurations that you already have, you can just very simply not even have to recreate it, just use that as a child device group and push those policies out to all this infrastructure. So that's the power of using that management platform and simplifying the operational complexity around it. And now, because the user experience for the user is they just work, and they just open their laptops and they start working. They don't have to worry about where they are and what kind of quality of service they will get depending on what locations they are working from. They get really, really good user experience. And what that means is they're also getting a very consistent user experience. It's not that, oh, when I was home and I was trying to access this application, I could not access it. Or while I was here, I could not access that application. So I was able to access the application, but because I moved two networks down, I was not able to get access to those applications. All of that complexities and user experience goes away, and the user experience improves, right? That's the advantage of being able to deploy this as a service at a massive scale. It's not about deploying one firewall in one location. We are talking about deploying hundreds of firewalls around the globe with just few clicks here and there. That's the power of Prisma Access. So if you talk about momentum, like just very highly couple quick use cases. We have a global consulting firm which operates in about 158 countries, right? They are a big consumer of Prisma Access Service. So their mobile workforce, they said like, okay, I'm going to take off everything from the infrastructure, and I'm going to have all the users connect into the service from all these different countries and all these different locations and provide access to my entire infrastructure through the service in a secure manner. So this is some massive, large-scale deployment. Like this doesn't happen overnight, right? And so this is the kind of infrastructure, because we are operating it as a service in a cloud environment, we are able to automatically scale and expand to this kind of growing user population. And as the demand shifts, even if these 158 country users decide to come to one country for a particular user conference or a company event or whatever, because we are delivering the service from a public cloud, the scale, it automatically scales up and is able to consume and provide that service for that growing user base, or shift in demand for that matter. Shifting gears from mobile users, if you talk about sites, how do I secure office locations? Like in the older model, you would have deploy a stack of security in the office or connected that office into your corporate data centers in order to provide that security stack. But here, there's a large retailer, a US-based retailer, who removed all the security stack from all their retail stores, and they were able to onboard about 1,600 retail stores to our Prisma Access service in a SASE format, and being able to consume this as a service. And this deployment happened in less than a month. Right? 16 worldwide, like a US-based stores being able to secure and onboard it to the service. Right? We are purposefully keeping this session on talk track, limited to 30 minutes or so that we can open it up for more questions and in case you have some.
Yeah.
Question about the new features. So I assume that they will be available with the update of the plugin in Panorama, right? For instance, the DLP for Prisma Access.
Yeah, so the question was when the new features like DLP, DNS security, what's required before they're visible for current customers?
Right, so for that feature set, yes, both DNS security and the DLP service will be available to customers if you upgrade your Panorama to 9.0 and you upgrade to 1.5 plugin. Yeah, the DLP, currently the DNS security will be available to all customers at no additional cost. So if you are a Prisma Access customer, you will be able to consume the DNS service as is, like means you don't have to buy or pay for anything. DLP, on the other hand, is not a free service, so that you all understand. And currently with 1.5, we are launching that in an eval mode for now, so that you can try out the DLP service, and we will make that available to purchase in pretty shortly. Okay.
What about the SD-WAN? So how does that work, the SD-WAN? So how is it different for the branches, for instance, if you compare it to IPsec VPN? Do you need any device at the site third-party device, and do you need a Palo Alto device there for the SD-WAN solution?
Okay, very good question. So there's two ways by which you can onboard an SD-WAN device into, or three ways, if you will, into the Prisma access. The first is it could be any SD-WAN device on the network. First of all, it can be any device that is capable of creating an IPsec site-to-site tunnel to the Prisma access. So you can onboard a site using a site-to-site VPN tunnel. If it's an SD-WAN device from any Viptela, VeloCloud, Ariaka, doesn't matter, any SD-WAN device, you will be able to onboard that device into Prisma access using the site-to-site VPN tunnel from that SD-WAN device. The advantage of that one, though, is like if you already have an SD-WAN deployment going on, and you can continue to use that. But what we are announced today is the Palo Alto Networks firewall, a PA220 or a PA850 or a PA320, 3220, any of those Palo Alto Networks firewall devices, or a VM series firewall for that matter, will have the SD-WAN capabilities built into the PAN-OS itself. So instead of deploying a third-party SD-WAN device, if you deploy the Palo Alto Networks device in a branch, then you get the benefit of the SD-WAN. You get the benefit of the connectivity from end-to-end connectivity. It's not just about being able to reach us. And we also announced the SASE latency SLA, which means that you're getting an end-to-end connectivity from the service using our devices. And you can also provide local segmentation and local security in the branch because you have deployed a firewall in the branch. So it's an end-to-end security play if you decide to deploy our devices as an SD-WAN device and an on-prem networking and security device. Does that help answer your question? Okay.
When will be that available in the PAN-OS?
So the question was, when will that functionality be available in PAN-OS? So that is currently in beta. Many of our customers are already testing that. And this is part of the 9.1 release. It will be available to most of our customers. You will have to buy the SD-WAN subscription that we talked about in the keynote. And if you buy that, that functionality get enabled. So by the end of this year, that will go GA. But it's already in beta. If something, there are many customers who are already trying that in beta and providing very good feedback to us. And there's also a live beta forum for you to participate in. And if something that is of interest to you, you should talk to your account team and participate in the beta to get early access.
Thank you. The mobile user client, will that be integrated with the Traps or Cortex client? Or is it a separate client and/or?
Yeah, two different clients. So the question, yes. So the difference is the Cortex client is providing endpoint security, meaning whatever is happening on the endpoint, it is securing that. The GlobalProtect client is providing two functions. One, it is providing network security for anything that leaves in and out of the device. That's how you should think about it. Anything that is locally running on the device is Cortex. Anything that is leaving the device in and out of the network is provided by GlobalProtect. But on top of that security, GlobalProtect is also providing you access to the applications, right? That connectivity needs to be provided so that you can get access to your business applications as well when you're not in the network. I couldn't hear.
So the question was, Cortex is a framework. Will the GP client become part of the framework at some point, part of the Cortex framework?
Maybe, but there's no current plan in order to combine the two clients into one client.
Regarding SSL decryption, is there any way to limit which regions we deploy our SSL decryption certificates? So, for example, if we operate in North America and Europe and we don't want them to be deployed in Asia, is that possible with Prisma?
Why would you help me understand that? Why would you want to do that, though?
For example, we are onboarding some new regions, and they have like a separate tenant, and we want like to use their certificate for example LATAM and keep using our one for North America and Europe.
So if you're thinking about having different entities in different regions, then we have a feature called multi-tenancy. So you would deploy that feature and turn that on, and then you can control that way.
Okay, perfect.
So specific to that SD-WAN solution, how are you managing the middle mile?
Yeah? Want to take that, Warby?
Yeah, so there's a couple components to that. There is a session on Friday that's just focused on how Prisma Access can be the hub for SD-WAN. So you'll get a more complete answer there. But for the middle mile piece, we do have today monitoring and redundancy, and we're looking at throughput, and we have lots and lots of metrics that we track. Over time, we'll start to do more and more routing around jitter, latency, things like that as they change and become more dynamic. But already today we have lots of redundancy and throughput now for the middle mile where Prisma Access is the SD-WAN hub. So the question was, is this an acquisition or did we develop it? So the device that, like the PA220, 820 example, that's a PAN-OS feature that will add SD-WAN using Prisma Access that we built already today. So Prisma Access today is already built on PAN-OS under the hood as far as a security compute. Over time, we'll be adding functionality that's also PAN-OS developed. So it's not an acquisition, it's all in our own development. Yep, both at the edge and in the cloud.
But yeah, but just to be double clear, like the infrastructure that we use in order to deliver Prisma Access, we are using public cloud infrastructure like from Google, AWS, and so on and so forth. So we are able to take advantage of that massive network and the fibers and things like that have deployed, and we are a very premium partner of that service. So we take advantage of a lot of those features that are built into the public cloud in order to be able to provide the middle mile and the last mile for that matter of the service.
To the destination, are you deploying some sort of AI-based, like which polling things like jitter, latency, and things like some enhancements to BGP routing? So I was just trying to.
Yeah, so for the middle mile piece, the question was around what kind of enhancements around routing things. So, like for example, if we use both Google and AWS, but in the case of GCP, let's say the user connects to a gateway that happens to be on GCP. We will route on their fiber to the closest possible point to get to the service provider, the SaaS provider, like Office 365, whatever it is. All the networks, Google, AWS, Azure, they're all tier 1, they direct peer. So we cross that network as far as possible, and then we hand it off as close as possible, rather than route back out to the internet again. But as far as this particular path, the latency is a little bit high for this moment. We don't yet dynamically route around that, but it is something we're looking into. And there was one pretty far back, yeah.
If in case we already have an SD-WAN solution, is there a benefit to actually scrap that solution which is being sat in front of next generation firewall and use the SD-WAN feature in the edge device? Is there a benefit? Because it's IPsec tunnel that's actually established between the device across into Prisma.
Yeah, absolutely. So there are a couple, well, there's a commercial and a sales answer to this, which is, yeah, absolutely, you should scrap all that and buy Palo Alto Networks, right? But we are not salespeople, so I'm going to give you a technical answer to that, right? So the technical answer is, how does an SD-WAN or the network path get selected, right? One is that you have one end of the device, and then you have some metric based on that where you will monitor the efficiency of each of those links that are going into that SD-WAN device, and you'll say, let me monitor these links and decide which network to take, right? But for it to actually work, you need to get some responses from the server side also to say that, okay, what is happening on that side of the network when the whole session is to be established, and how does the session fail over? Like in the middle of the session, if there's a path that is performing better, how do you silently fail over the session to the other link and do that transaction? For that efficiency to happen, you need to have both the client side and the head-end side, right? So it matters where that SD-WAN device is terminating. So that's where the Prisma Access Hub will become an interesting intersection point for that SD-WAN device that is on-prem. So together, they are able to provide a much better routing and path monitoring and all of that in order to provide the best path to the actual destination. But if you control only one end of it, then you will still be able to take advantage of whatever features that SD-WAN device is providing you in order to do that, but you're not getting the full benefit of it. Does that help answer the question? Okay.
Yeah, one other aspect there is if you have our Palo Alto Networks device in the branch location, you can get visibility within that branch if you want to have more control, but you want to have that same level of security. If you have a third-party SD-WAN device, they have some security features, but you're not going to get wildfire, app ID, all the different prevention that we can do and visibility. So if you use us in that branch or retail location as not only the SD-WAN, but also for internal visibility control, then you get both benefits. Yeah.
Hi. So it looks like we've got a solution from the client to the cloud, the client to your data center. We've got solutions for within the data center, so either with hardware or VM firewalls controlling within that, and even within an office, if the firewall is the router, for example, within your office, then you're getting as the client is routing between subnets. But we don't really have a solution for the client talking on its local LAN. So for example, in something like a Wi-Fi, like a site Wi-Fi network, you might have thousands of clients that are all in the same subnet. Depending upon the software that you're using, so something like Skype, for example, or Teams or things like that require client-to-client communication. So those might be going directly at, in the same layer 2 without ever going up through a firewall. Are you looking at making the client side account for local LAN communications as well?
So from a GlobalProtect solution perspective, it does work on layer 3 only, right? So there was a talk that was given by another customer at our Ignite conference in the US a couple months ago, where the way they decided to solve that problem was they're saying like it doesn't matter, they will treat their internal networks also as an external network. It doesn't matter where you are, it doesn't matter if you're connecting to your internal Wi-Fi. They said is like irrespective of that, the client is always going to create a tunnel. And so they deployed firewalls, something that we call as internal gateway, and this is a feature that is built into the PAN OS, that the client can connect to an internal gateway. So may not be inside the Wi-Fi switch, but just north of Wi-Fi switch, you can create that, you can deploy a firewall and make that the access gateway before any client can talk to any client, right? So you're creating that communication. You're not creating incremental latency for that user, but you're still securing that point-to-point connection or traffic between two clients.
Yeah, sorry?
Yeah, so they're right, but the point though is that you have to create the only way to secure the two users from talking to each other. You will have to create a security boundary between the two, unless you're running something locally on the client itself and trying to do all the filtering and the security inspection on the client. But at that point, if you start thinking about it, right? Operationally, it may look like that you have solved the problem by not having to buy a bigger firewall, but now you're managing policies on all these different endpoints from that perspective. Operationally, I'm not sure that it is actually going to scale on thousands of endpoints by locally providing that firewall. For example, if we said a VM series firewall gets deployed locally on the endpoint itself, now operational management and overhead and security patches and everything that needs to be deployed on the endpoint, it becomes an operationally not that efficient model. So we talked about it, we thought about it, but I'm not still sure that I can actually productize it in such a way that a large enterprise will be okay to deploy it, but open to having that conversation. Sure, but Correct. But the point though is like this advanced threat, it's not the desktop firewall, like that's like port and protocol based, saying that, oh, okay, I can open this port and allow it to go through, and we have all understand that that's not security per se, that is just about some ACLs. But for me to be able to do this detection of the advanced threat, which is doing DNSSEC, for example, on the endpoint, it's not just local static analysis on the endpoint. I'll have to do some advanced hunting, which means that I have to constantly update that processes and constantly deliver security patches and all that, like unlike a desktop client-based firewall that exists on the endpoint. So that's a very different operational model. If you wanted to do a local firewall, the products already exist. It's built into the native operating system from Windows and Apple, but I have not found a way to actually do it in an intelligent way. There may be possibility, but I don't know of that yet, but open to that conversation.
Yeah, and if you think about the computational requirements,
Yeah,
I mean, you'd have to either consume half or 80% of what that device actually needs to run to do everything we do in the cloud, or you have to give up a lot of functionality and do something lightweight and reduced, which means we're back to the problem of you have two solutions that aren't the same. You would have 10,000 devices sending logs somewhere for monitoring, and it's not, like Joby said, it's an interesting conversation, but we haven't figured out a way to really do that at scale. And then make it even worse by now you want to do it on a phone, right? It's not enough compute there. Any other questions?
Was that a question or no? All right then. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.